I still remember clearly the moment I received the text message from my daughter-in-law. "Mom, tomorrow afternoon at 5, we're having Daisy's 5th birthday party at our house. Please come early." Looking at those few short lines, I smiled. In truth, it had been a long time since I'd been able to take part fully in a family gathering. Ever since my son and his wife became successful, moved into a large villa in the suburbs, and joined that upper-class circle where I always felt out of place, the distance between me and them had grown steadily. But Daisy was my only granddaughter, and her birthday was always something I looked forward to every year. I started preparing the night before. The pale blue dress I'd bought at a spring fair, a pair of low heels so my feet wouldn't hurt, and the old pearl necklace my husband Elijah had given me for our 25th wedding anniversary. My husband had been gone nearly 10 years, but every time I wore that necklace, I felt as though he was still holding my hand. The next morning, I got up early and made a batch of apple pie, Daisy's favorite, and carefully placed it in a box, wrapped it in cellophane, and tied it with a pink ribbon. I knew the party would have all sorts of expensive desserts, but I wanted my granddaughter to see that her grandmother still remembered her tastes, still took the time to make something with her own hands. At 4 p.m., I arrived at my son's gate. The 3-story villa gleamed, warm yellow light spilling out through the large glass windows, the garden already decorated with balloons and strings of twinkling lights. For a moment, I felt like a guest arriving at a lavish event, not a mother, not a grandmother in her own family. The door opened, and my daughter-in-law Amelia appeared, smiling broadly but with eyes that were distant. "Oh, you're here, Mom. Come in, we're just finishing up." I stepped inside and handed her the apple pie. "Could you put this on the dessert table for me? Daisy really loves it." Amelia took the box, hesitated for just a second before saying, "Sure, but I think I'll just leave it in the kitchen, and if anyone wants some later, they can bring it out. The dessert table out there is already full." It was such a light remark, but it weighed on my heart. "It's fine," I told myself, "as long as Daisy gets to eat it." Inside, the guests had already gathered, mostly my son's and daughter-in-law's friends and colleagues, elegantly dressed, chatting and laughing. Daisy was wearing a purple princess dress, her blonde hair braided elaborately, running around with her friends. When she saw me, she exclaimed, "Grandma!" She ran into my arms, then was quickly called back by Amelia to take pictures with the special group of friends. I stepped back into a corner, observing. Everyone was seated in the spacious living room, the main table fully occupied. I looked around, but saw no seat for me. A moment later, Amelia came over, that familiar polite smile on her face. "Mom, I've set a place for you in the kitchen, so it's quieter. It's too noisy here." In the kitchen. I could hardly believe my ears. But the eyes of the people around us made me not want to cause a scene. "All right, that's fine," I answered softly, trying to keep my voice even. The kitchen was large, but completely cut off from the party space. From here, I could hear laughter, the clinking of glasses, but I couldn't see a single face. On the kitchen table, a few side dishes and my apple pie box sat off in a lonely corner. I sat on a tall chair by the counter, looking out the small window toward the yard. The MC's voice started inviting everyone to sing happy birthday. In my mind, the image of last year came back. I'd also been seated at the far end of the table, nearly forgotten, but I'd still forced myself to smile because I didn't want Daisy to remember her birthday as the day her grandmother cried. This year, I thought it would be different. I'd hoped foolishly, as it turns out. The singing echoed from the living room, followed by bursts of applause. I held back a sigh, telling myself, as long as Daisy is happy. But then Amelia's voice rang out clearly over the microphone. "Thank you everyone for coming to celebrate. Today, we're gathered here with family and close friends." Her voice paused for a beat. "And of course, a special thanks to the parents on both sides. Oh, my mom isn't here right now, she's probably somewhere in the house." Scattered laughter followed. Somewhere in the house, as if I were some wandering ghost, unworthy of being part of their perfect family picture. I felt something inside me crack. Not just because of the kitchen seat. Not just because of the half-hearted introduction. But because I realized, I had been pushed out of my own family's story long ago. Today, they simply felt confident enough to do it openly. I looked at the phone on the kitchen table. A thought flickered, at first faint, then growing sharper. There was a number I hadn't dialed in over 15 years. A number that, if I called, would stir up things they never wanted mentioned again. Things that, if exposed, could make this perfect party crumble like a sandcastle before the tide. I touched my finger to the screen, but didn't call right away. Instead, I let my mind drift back into the past, to the day the seeds of all this were planted. 15 years ago, when Elijah was still alive, we lived in a small house downtown. My son Daniel had just married Amelia. The first time I met my daughter-in-law, I sensed something controlling about her. Her eyes seemed to constantly assess everyone and everything, weighing whether they were good enough to belong in her world. Elijah used to say, "Maybe she's just trying to make a good impression, don't be too harsh." But over time, I realized it wasn't just a first impression, this was who Amelia truly was. Everything around her had to be arranged her way, and Daniel slowly became part of that arrangement. When Elijah died, I thought Daniel would become closer to me. But Amelia quickly filled that space with parties for friends, vacations, and then a new house far out in the suburbs. I was invited, but always felt like a guest, not family. The day Daisy was born, I cried with joy. I thought at least, as her grandmother, I would have a place in her life. But from the time she was just an infant, Daisy's schedule had been tightly managed by Amelia, from swimming lessons to music classes, to family photo sessions where I often wasn't invited, or invited at the last minute to stand in the background. The deepest hurt came when Daniel, the boy I once held through his feverish nights, began to speak to me in the same tone as Amelia, polite, cordial, but cold and distant. I didn't know when I had become an inconvenience in their lives. The soft sound of the kitchen door opening cut into my thoughts. It was the maid, carrying in a tray of dirty dishes. "Do you want to come out and join everyone?" she asked quietly, a trace of sympathy in her voice. I shook my head. "It's fine, go ahead and work." She smiled faintly, then left. Alone again, I sat in the half-lit kitchen, the music and laughter outside drifting in from another world. I opened my contacts, my finger hovering over the name, L. Carter. It had been so long since I'd called. The last time was at Elijah's funeral, when that person sent a large pure white floral wreath, the kind reserved for someone truly special. I remembered Amelia's look when she saw it, a look of discomfort. Who was L. Carter? In the family, almost no one knew. Only Elijah and I knew. And if Daniel knew, I was certain he would never look at his family the same way again. I pressed my lips together. Part of me wanted to stand up, pretend nothing had happened, wait for the candle blowing, and then leave. But another part, the part that had been suppressed through years of being disregarded and pushed aside, was urging me to press that call button. Not for revenge, but to reclaim the place that had always belonged to me. The MC's voice rang out from outside, "Now it's time for everyone to raise a glass to celebrate Daisy." I took a deep breath, feeling my heart pound hard in my chest. And then, I pressed call. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, someone picked up. A deep, husky male voice, but full of weight, came through. "Hello." I swallowed hard, feeling as if my heart had skipped a beat. "Lance, it's me." There was a brief silence on the other end, as if the man was rearranging memories in his mind. Then his voice came again, lower now, slower. "Good Lord. Evelyn. Is it really you?" I smiled faintly, a smile laced with both relief and tension. "It's me. It's been too long." "Far too long," he replied, his tone softening. "Are you all right?" I looked around the brightly lit but empty kitchen, the laughter outside sounding far away. Not exactly. Actually, I'm in a place, full of people. But I feel like I'm standing on the outside. Lance was silent for a few seconds, as if reading between the lines. It's about them, isn't it? I didn't need to ask who them was. He always knew. Yes. And I think it's time for you to show up. I heard a deep breath on the other end, then the creak of a wooden chair. Are you sure, Evelyn? If I walk in, there's no going back. More sure than ever, I replied, my voice strangely calm. They've pushed me as far away as they possibly can. And if I stay silent today, they'll think they have the right to keep doing it forever. Another pause, then Lance said. All right. Send me the address. I'll be there right away. I hung up, my hand still trembling slightly. In my mind, old memories came flooding back, memories of Lance Carter, the man who had once been part of my family in a way no one but Elijah knew. I met Lance 20 years ago, when Elijah and I were doing charity work for an orphanage. Back then, Lance was a young man in his early 20s, raised in that very orphanage. He was smart, lively, and possessed a rare kind of loyalty. Elijah cared for him like a son, and I always saw in him a sincerity that was hard to find in the outside world. When Daniel was growing up, Lance often helped watch over him, taught him sports, even tutored him when Elijah and I were busy. But when Amelia came into the picture, she disliked Lance from the very start. He doesn't fit with our family, she told me bluntly once, right after Lance had left our house. When I asked why, she just shrugged, I feel like he knows too much. A few months later, Lance suddenly disappeared from all gatherings. Elijah said it was best to keep a distance, to keep things peaceful. I didn't press further, but deep down I always had the feeling, there was a secret between Lance and our family, a secret Amelia was determined to bury at all costs. I was lost in thought when the laughter outside grew louder. Someone pushed open the kitchen door. It was Daniel. My son, in a deep blue suit, tie perfectly knotted, a polite smile fixed to his face. Mom, why are you sitting here? I've been looking for you everywhere, Daniel said, trying to sound light. What are you looking for me for? I asked, my eyes fixed on the glass of water on the table. Well, people are asking where you are. Come out and take the family photo. I looked up, locking eyes with my son. Family? The people out there are your family. But me, where do I fit in that picture? Daniel hesitated for a moment, then quickly regained his composure. Mom, don't overthink it. The seating arrangement is just coincidence. Random. I cut in. You know, Daniel, things that happen by coincidence over and over, stop being coincidences. Daniel stayed silent, blinking rapidly, a sign he was searching for a safe answer. Mom, today is Daisy's birthday. I don't want any tension. Don't worry, I said, my voice low but steady. There will be tension. But I won't be the one starting it. Daniel frowned, about to say more, but Amelia's voice called in from outside. Daniel, hurry up. We're about to cut the cake. He glanced at me one more time, as if wanting to say something, but then turned and left. About 20 minutes later, when the music and toasts outside had just quieted, I heard a car stop in front of the gate. From the kitchen window, I saw a black SUV. The door opened, and Lance stepped out. He was the same tall frame, broad shoulders, eyes sharp yet deep. His hair now had a few streaks of gray, but his demeanor hadn't changed, slow, deliberate steps, as if each one had been calculated beforehand. I went to open the side door leading into the kitchen. He stepped in, nodding in greeting. You haven't changed much, Lance said, the corner of his mouth curling into a faint smile. And you, look ready for a storm, I replied. He placed a thick document bag on the kitchen counter. Everything's in here. What you do with it, is up to you. I looked at the bag, my heart beating with both excitement and fear. Are you sure this is? More certain than anything, Lance interrupted. They think it's gone forever. But I kept everything. All it takes is a word from you, and I'll say it in front of everyone. I swallowed. Outside, Amelia was leading everyone into the sharing thoughts segment. I heard my name mentioned, but she quickly shifted to thanking another guest. Lance leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Do you want me to go in now? I took a deep breath. No. Wait a bit. I want to see how far they'll keep up the act. When we stepped out of the kitchen, several people's eyes immediately fixed on Lance. Amelia froze briefly when she saw him, her smile stiffening as if it had been frozen in place. Oh, this is, she began, glancing at me. I invited him, I said firmly. Lance Carter. Amelia swallowed, then tried to regain her composure. Ah, nice to see you again. It's been a long time. It has, Lance replied evenly. Long enough that I thought some people wanted me to disappear. The words dropped like a stone into a still pond. Conversation slowed, and a few guests exchanged glances. Daniel approached, his eyes a mix of surprise and caution. Lance, what are you doing here? I'm here, to wish my niece a happy birthday, Lance said, his eyes never leaving Amelia. And to return something that belongs to this family. He set the document bag on the side table, right next to the multi-tiered cake. My heart pounded. I knew what was inside, copies of documents, photographs, and old letters Amelia would never want anyone to see. They were connected to a time Daniel knew nothing about, and if he did, he would never look at his wife the same way again. Amelia stepped forward, forcing a smile. I think you should keep those to yourself. This is a party, not a place to tell the truth. Lance cut in. Interesting. I remember someone once told me that, the truth will set you free. Turns out, not everyone wants freedom. Daniel frowned, looking at me. Mom, what is this about? I looked straight into my son's eyes, then glanced at Amelia. You'll find out. Tonight. Daisy's innocent voice rang out. Grandma, who is this? The entire room fell silent. I bent down, stroking my granddaughter's hair. He's an old friend of mine. And someone who knows this family better than anyone else here. Amelia bit her lip, her hand tightening around her wine glass. Evelyn, she said quietly, almost hissing, you're ruining everything. I smiled a smile I knew would frighten her. No, Amelia. I'm fixing everything. Starting today. The air in the room felt sucked dry. The background music had stopped at some point, leaving only the loud, unpleasant ticking of the wall clock. Every gaze was fixed on the document bag beside the cake, as if it contained a bomb everyone knew was about to go off. I stood close to Lance, feeling his body tense like a drawn bowstring. Amelia, on the other hand, tried to appear composed, but her hand gripping the glass was white from the strain. Daniel looked at me, then at the document bag, his face torn between confusion and fear. Lance, Amelia said, her voice a mix of mockery and warning, I don't know what you're trying to pull, but you should remember this is a child's birthday party, not a courtroom. Exactly, Lance replied, his voice steady but sharp as a blade. And it would be better if everyone here knew exactly who is hosting this party. Daniel frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I placed my hand on my son's shoulder. Daniel, before you hear any more, I want you to remember one thing, I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it for you and for Daisy. Daniel stepped back half a pace, his eyes wavering. Mom, I don't understand. You will. I turned to Lance. Open it. Lance nodded, opened the document bag, and pulled out a large brown envelope. He began taking out stacks of papers, placing them on the table. The documents were old, some yellowed with age, but the writing was still clear. This, Lance said, holding up one sheet high for everyone to see, is a copy of the ownership certificate for Carter and Harlan from 16 years ago. At that time, the owners were Elijah Miller, and one other person. He set the paper down and flipped to the next. The other co-owner was Amelia Carter. Yes, Amelia, before you became Amelia Miller, you were Amelia Carter, my legal wife. The whole room seemed to erupt into a constant murmur. Daniel's face went pale, his lips moving as if to say something but no sound coming out. Amelia stood frozen, but I could see her body give the slightest twitch. Amelia and I married when she was only 20, Lance continued, his voice now hard as steel. Together with Elijah, Daniel's father, we expanded the company. But just 2 years later, Amelia vanished from my life, taking with her some very important documents. A few months later, I learned she had married Elijah Miller. The murmuring grew louder. Daniel whipped his head toward Amelia. What? You once. Amelia cut in, her voice trembling but still clinging to control. Daniel, let me explain. That was a difficult time. I just wanted to get away. Get away from me by marrying his father. Lance scoffed. And not only that, you transferred the entire ownership of the company into your and Elijah's names, cutting me out for a handful of loose change. I stood still, but my chest burned. This was the first time Daniel was hearing the truth that Amelia's connection to our family began with outright betrayal. But, Lance went on, pulling out a stack of photographs, that's not all. These are photos of Amelia meeting with Elijah, while she was still my legal wife. Taken in 2006, at a hotel in Boston. I kept them because I knew one day they would be needed. Amelia screamed, "You're making this up. This is slander." Lance shrugged. Funny thing. I also have the hotel receipt, with your signature on it. And I'm sure the court would be very interested to see it. Daniel turned to me, his eyes bloodshot. Mom, did you know about this? I took a deep breath. I knew part of it. Your father confessed to me before he died. He said, it was the biggest mistake of his life. But Amelia, she didn't stop there. Amelia spun toward me, her eyes blazing. Shut up. No, I replied, my voice like ice. You planned this long ago, climbing from Lance to Elijah, then to Daniel. You thought you'd take everything and push out anyone who didn't suit you. I stayed silent for 15 years until today. The air was thick, the people in the room frozen, no one daring to speak. Daisy stood in the corner, her wide eyes taking it all in, not understanding. My heart ached for her, but it was far too late to turn back. Daniel stepped all the way back, his hands on his head. God, why? Amelia stepped toward him, trying to take his hand. Daniel, listen to me. I did everything for this family. Family? Daniel yanked his hand away. What family? You destroyed my family and call it for the family. Lance placed another stack of papers on the table. And this is the most recent share transfer agreement. Amelia held the entire company after Elijah's death, then quietly moved a portion to an overseas account. Daniel, what do you think has been causing the company's recent financial losses? Daniel turned to Amelia, his face now filled with fury. Is that true? Amelia opened her mouth but no words came out. The room fell into absolute silence. I knew this was the point of no return. But I also knew if I didn't do this, I would remain the woman banished to the kitchen, forgotten in my own family. I stepped forward, locking eyes with Amelia. You thought you could erase the past. But the past doesn't disappear. It waits, and today is the day it comes up. Amelia trembled, stepping back. Lance stayed still, his eyes fixed on her like a hawk on its prey. Suddenly Daisy spoke up, Grandma, what's going on? Daniel and I both turned to her. I knelt down and pulled her into my arms. Daisy, sometimes, adults make mistakes. And I want you to know, the truth always matters, even when it hurts. She hugged me tightly without saying a word. But I knew this image would be etched into her memory. Daniel stood in silence for a moment, then turned to Lance. I need to know everything. Not just tonight's part, everything. Lance nodded. I've been waiting 15 years for you to say that. Amelia suddenly bolted toward the door, the sound of her heels striking hard against the tile. A few guests whispered, but no one stopped her. The front door slammed shut. The room was left with only the sound of heavy breathing. I knew this was only the beginning. Whatever was in that document bag would reveal even more truths that could destroy not only Amelia, but whatever relationships were left in this family. I sat down, feeling my legs slightly unsteady. Lance placed his hand on my shoulder, light but firm. You did the right thing, Evelyn. Painful, but right. I looked at him and nodded. Right or not, time will tell. But at least I'm not locked in the kitchen anymore. The room still hadn't recovered its rhythm after Amelia's exit. Some guests exchanged glances, a few quietly made excuses to leave. Only Daniel, Lance, myself, and a few familiar faces from Elijah's side of the family remained, people old enough to understand the real storm hadn't yet hit. I looked at Daniel. My son was slumped in a chair, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, staring at the floor. I knew no words of comfort would mean anything now. Only the truth could pull him out of the chaos. Daniel, I said slowly, do you want to keep hearing this? It may be worse than what you've just learned. He looked up, his eyes red and weary, but with a glint of resolve. Mom, I don't want to live in the dark for another second. If the truth is fire, then I'll walk into it. Lance gave a slight nod at those words. He pulled the document bag closer and took out a file thicker than the rest. These are the financial reports I managed to keep, thanks to an old contact in the company. They show transfers from the main corporate account into personal accounts belonging to Amelia, and another man. Daniel frowned. Another man? Yes. Lance flipped a few pages, pointing at a bank statement. This account belongs to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, supposedly run by someone named Peter Hall. But in reality, that's just an alias. The person behind it is a familiar face, you'll recognize him immediately. He pulled out a color photograph and set it on the table. I glanced at it and my heart stopped. Oh my God, Daniel whispered. That's Uncle Alan. Alan Miller, Elijah's younger brother, Daniel's uncle. This was the man who had once helped Elijah build the company in its early days, but who had abruptly retired for health reasons years ago. Turns out, he had never disappeared. He'd been secretly siphoning money from the company with Amelia all along. Amelia and Alan have been working together for at least 8 years, Lance continued. I found traces going back to 2015, but it could have started earlier. They funneled money overseas, then invested in projects only the two of them controlled. Daniel, every dollar they took, was something that should have been yours and Daisy's. Daniel leaned back in his chair, head tilted toward the ceiling, eyes closed tight. I saw his hands clench, veins standing out. Mom, why didn't Dad say anything? I sighed. Elijah knew part of it. But by then, he was weak, and he thought keeping quiet would protect you. He also believed Amelia would change, at least for Daisy's sake. He was wrong. Lance added, and now, they think they're safe because they believe all the evidence has been destroyed. But I've kept the originals in another location. Evelyn, it's up to you to decide what happens next. I stayed silent. In my mind flashed Amelia's face tonight when she gave me that polite smile in the kitchen doorway, her eyes looking at me like an outdated piece of furniture. And Daniel's face as he held his daughter, an expression now weighed down by betrayal. I looked at Lance. If we make all this public, the company will be shaken. So will the family. Yes, he said. But if you don't, they'll keep going. And Daisy will grow up thinking deception is normal. Daniel opened his eyes, looking at me. Mom. I don't know if I can take all of this at once. But I know one thing: if you've kept silent for 15 years because of me, then I don't want you to carry it another day. I nodded slowly. Then we'll end it. Tonight. We moved into Daniel's office on the second floor to avoid the eyes and ears of the remaining guests. Lance spread all the documents out on the large wooden desk, sorting them into groups: old marriage certificates, transfer contracts, photographs, bank statements. Each bundle was labeled and clearly numbered. We need 2 copies of everything, Lance said. One to give to the lawyer first thing tomorrow morning. One to keep as backup. Daniel asked, if Amelia comes back in. I doubt she'll come back tonight, Lance interrupted. But she will make contact. Maybe to negotiate, maybe to threaten. Either way, we have to stay ahead of her. I sat in the chair by the window, looking down at the yard. Darkness had already fallen, with only the yellow light from the living room casting a faint glow over the lawn. I thought back to my image in the kitchen just hours earlier alone, with the forgotten box of apple pie. The physical distance from there to here wasn't far, but it had been a long journey of resolve. Daniel sat down across from me. Mom, I have to be honest, it feels like my whole life was built on a false story. I took his hand. No, Daniel. You're still my son, still Daisy's father. Amelia's actions can't erase that. But they do give you the chance to rebuild everything on the truth. Lance interjected, his voice low. And this time, don't let anyone push someone away from the table again. About 30 minutes later, just as we finished organizing the files, Daniel's phone buzzed. Amelia's name appeared on the screen. Daniel looked at us, then put it on speaker. Amelia's voice came sharp as a knife. You're with her and Lance, aren't you? Daniel kept his voice calm. If by her you mean my mother, yes. If by Lance you mean the man who just told me the truth, then also yes. A sharp breath came through the line. Daniel, you don't understand. Everything I did was to protect you from Alan. Lance gave a short, cold laugh. Protect him by sharing profits with him? Shut up. Amelia snapped. Daniel, if you keep listening to them, you'll lose everything. The company, the house, everything. I can save you, but you have to trust me. Daniel was silent for a few seconds. You can save me, by telling the truth. Right now. A long pause. Then Amelia's voice came lower, not over the phone. Meet me. Alone. No, Daniel said. If you want to talk, talk in front of everyone. My mother. Lance. And the lawyer. Amelia's tone turned into a mocking laugh. Then good luck. You've just declared war on someone who knows all your weaknesses. The line went dead. The room fell silent. I looked at Lance. She won't sit still. Of course not, he nodded. But that's a good sign. It means she's lost the upper hand. Daniel leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. Tomorrow, we go to the lawyer. I put my hand on his shoulder. Not just that. We go all the way to show Daisy that the truth matters more than any performance. That night, after everyone had left, I stayed to help clean. The large house was now empty, each footstep echoing. I picked up the unopened box of apple pie from the kitchen and carried it to Daisy's room. She was asleep, her blonde hair fanned out over the pillow. I set the box on her small bedside table and kissed her forehead gently. I promise, I whispered, you'll never have to sit alone in a kitchen. When I turned, Lance was standing in the doorway. He didn't say anything, just nodded, as if he understood everything. I knew tomorrow would be brutal. But I also knew we had started down a road with no turning back. And this time, I would see it through to the end. The next morning, I woke as the first light of dawn broke. Pale sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting faint golden streaks across the wooden floor. I hadn't slept much. My mind kept spinning with images from the night before, the document bag, Daniel's eyes, and Amelia's mocking laugh over the phone. I made coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen. It felt strange to be standing here in the morning, in the same place where just last night I had been placed as an outsider. Now, this kitchen belonged to me in a new way, not as the forgotten corner, but as the starting point for a battle. Daniel came down after me, his blue shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He sat, took the mug of coffee I'd poured, sipped, and said quietly, "Today's going to be hard, Mom." Hard, I nodded, but necessary. Lance arrived at 8 a.m., still in his black leather jacket, carrying a new case file. "I've called the lawyer," he said. "We meet at 10. But I suspect Amelia won't wait that long." He was right. At 8:30, the doorbell rang. Daniel went to open it, and there stood Amelia. Still in an elegant dress, but her hair was disheveled, last night's makeup not fully removed, eyes red and swollen. She didn't look like a victor, but like someone cornered. "I need to talk," she said, her tone almost an order. "Then come in," Daniel replied, stepping aside. Amelia walked into the living room, her eyes flicking over me and Lance. "Not in private?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "If you have something to say it in front of all of us." She took a deep breath and sat in the chair opposite us. "Fine. But before you judge, hear me out. Alan used me. He approached me, promised to protect my shares in the company if I helped him move some money offshore. I didn't think it was illegal, until it was too late." Lance gave a short, dry laugh. "Oh, the classic story. I was used. You forget I have emails between you and Alan discussing exactly how to hide the transactions." Amelia shot him a glare, then turned to Daniel. "He's hated me from the start, so don't believe him." "Daniel, I admit I was wrong not to tell you. But everything I did was to keep the company from being taken over by Alan." I tilted my head, looking straight into her eyes. "If you wanted to keep the company, you wouldn't have opened a private account in the Cayman Islands to funnel profits into." "Drop the act, Amelia. We have everything." Amelia bit her lip, her hand clenching until her knuckles turned white. "If you take this to court, the company will collapse. Hundreds of employees will lose their jobs. The shareholders will sue. Daniel, you'll lose everything." Daniel was silent for a moment. "Maybe. But staying silent means letting you and Alan keep going. And that's not what Dad would have wanted." At the mention of Elijah, Amelia flinched slightly. She looked at me, her voice turning icy. "What do you want? Tell me. Money? For me to leave the company? Or just to humiliate me in front of everyone?" I didn't lower my eyes. "I want the truth recorded, before the law. I want your name gone from the company and from my son's life. And I want Daisy to grow up without having to learn how to lie just to survive." She let out a dry laugh. "You think Daisy will thank you when she grows up?" "No. She'll remember you as the one who destroyed her family." I replied calmly, "No, Amelia. You destroyed this family. I'm just cleaning up the pieces." Lance placed a fresh stack of documents on the table. "This is the agreement. If Amelia signs, we won't push for a criminal investigation immediately. But all shares and management control will be transferred to Daniel. You will leave the company, leave the house, and cut all business ties with Alan." Amelia stared at the papers, then looked up, her eyes full of hatred. "You'll regret this." "I've regretted enough already," Daniel answered, his voice low but firm. The room was thick with silence. Finally, Amelia stood, snatched up her handbag. "I'll have my lawyer review this. But if you think you can take me down easily, you're wrong." She walked out, the sound of her heels echoing on the tile, then the door slammed shut. After she left, Lance exhaled. She's stalling. Probably to destroy or hide more evidence. I know, Daniel said. But at least now we've dragged her into the light. And Mom, he turned to me, I know this hasn't been easy for you. I gave a faint smile, though the undercurrent inside me was still strong. Easy? No. Worth it? Yes. Lance checked his watch. We can still make it to the lawyer's office. The sooner we file everything, the harder it'll be for her to maneuver. We gathered the documents, each of us carrying a portion. As I stepped out the door, I glanced back at the house. Last night, I had been nothing but a shadow pushed into the kitchen. Today, I was leaving it as someone actively rewriting the story. I knew the battle wasn't over. Amelia wasn't the type to quit. But I also knew this time, she no longer had my silence as an advantage. And I was ready for the endgame. That afternoon, after leaving the lawyer's office, Daniel and I returned to his house. Lance stayed behind to work further with the lawyer on the transfer paperwork and legal strategy. I thought I'd have a moment to breathe, but Amelia struck back faster than I'd imagined. By 4 p.m., Daniel got a call from the company's accounting department. The voice of the female staffer on the line trembled. Mr. Daniel, we just received an order to transfer the entire $2.5 million from the reserve fund into a new account, under your own signature. Daniel's face went pale. I haven't signed anything this morning. I knew instantly this was Amelia's move. She had likely prepared a forged signature in advance, or used Daniel's access while they were still together. And if that money disappeared, she could erase the trail within hours. Stop that transfer immediately. Daniel barked. We tried, but the transaction has already been confirmed and the funds are on the way. Daniel cursed, slamming his fist on the table. I put my hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension in his muscles. She wants to put you in the position of being suspected, I said. She wants to make you the villain in the shareholders' eyes. Daniel looked at me, fury sparking in his eyes. I'm not letting her win. We called Lance immediately. He picked up at once, his tone tense. I'm guessing Amelia just landed a hit. The reserve fund, Daniel replied. $2.5 million. She made it look like I authorized it. Lance swore under his breath. I'll call someone at the bank. But Evelyn, Daniel, she won't stop here. She'll use anything, even the media. He was right. Less than an hour later, Daniel's phone was buzzing non-stop with messages. Business news sites and social media were already circulating an article with the headline. CEO Daniel Miller suspected of embezzling company funds for personal investments. The article included a photo of Daniel leaving the office that morning, likely taken by Amelia's people, along with internal sources claiming he had signed multiple suspicious documents. Daniel tossed his phone onto the table. She wants to hit first. If the public believes this, the shareholders will force me to resign. I squeezed his hand lightly. Then we have to get the truth out faster than she does. Lance returned to the house just before 7 p.m., carrying a small external hard drive. I just got this from a former employee, someone who used to work in IT for the company. It contains security camera footage from the accounting office, yesterday. He plugged the drive into his laptop. The screen showed Amelia entering the accounting department, wearing sunglasses, carrying a folder. She was seen speaking with the department head, then handing him a stack of papers to sign. When he stepped away from his desk, she discreetly took an access card from a drawer and used it to log into the system. This evidence, Lance said, will prove Amelia accessed the financial system. Combine it with the login data matching the exact time the $2.5 million transfer was created and we'll have enough to clear Daniel and implicate her. Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. But how do we present this without giving her time to destroy or counter it? I said, make it public before she can react. Not in some tabloid at a special shareholders meeting. Lance nodded. I can arrange for an online meeting tomorrow morning. But Evelyn, are you ready to face her directly? Because I'm certain she'll show up. I met his eyes. I've sat in the kitchen long enough. It's time I sit at the main table. That night, we prepared everything. Lance compiled the video evidence, along with the bank statements and the forged signature for comparison. Daniel coordinated with the lawyer to send out the notice for the shareholders' meeting. I wrote a personal statement not just about the $2.5 million, but the truth from the past 15 years. As I wrote, my hand sometimes trembled. Memories I thought had been buried came rushing back. The day I learned Elijah was having an affair with Amelia, the first time I saw Daniel after Elijah died, the look in Amelia's eyes when she first took control of the company, all of it leading to tomorrow. The next morning, at 9 a.m., the shareholders' meeting began via video call. More than 30 faces appeared on the large screen in Daniel's living room. Lance sat on my right, Daniel on my left. The chairman opened the session, but Amelia's face was already visible in frame number 4. Hair neatly tied back, makeup flawless, her polite smile perfectly in place. "If I may," she said, "before we address the company's issues, I want to express my disappointment in the conduct of the current CEO." Daniel stayed composed. "Thank you, Amelia. And I'd like to express my disappointment in your conduct." He gave Lance the signal. The video evidence began to play Amelia entering the accounting office, taking the access card, logging into the system. Simultaneously, the login records appeared on screen, showing the timestamp that matched the $2.5 million transfer. The virtual meeting fell completely silent. Amelia's face paled, but she quickly regained her composure. This could be staged. Everyone knows videos can be edited. I unmuted my microphone. "If you believe this is fake, I'm prepared to hand the original over to the police and the FBI for analysis. And I think the shareholders would want that too." Several members nodded, some began whispering among themselves. Daniel continued. "I also have a statement from my mother, Evelyn Miller, who has witnessed and kept evidence of Amelia's abuse of power and embezzlement for years." I opened my document, my voice clear. I didn't want to tell this story. But if I stay silent, I'll be enabling the person who destroyed my family and this company. Amelia once exploited my husband, Elijah Miller, to steal shares from Lance Harlan. Then she colluded with Alan Miller to secretly drain the company's funds. And now, she's trying to frame Daniel to keep control of the finances. A board member spoke up. "Amelia, do you have a response?" Amelia pressed her lips together, but the usual confidence was gone. "I want to consult my lawyer before responding," the chairman said curtly. "You may. But for now, the board will vote on temporarily suspending all your powers in the company pending investigation." When the vote results appeared, 27 out of 30 were in favor. Amelia quietly turned off her camera, disappearing from the screen. Daniel leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. Lance looked at me and nodded slightly. I felt something heavy lift from my chest. But I also knew Amelia wasn't necessarily finished. Because someone like her always has one last card to play. The shareholders' meeting ended at 11 a.m. Daniel's living room still held the large screen showing the list of participants who had logged off. Outside, the sun was high, but none of us felt any real relief. Lance closed the laptop, looking at me and Daniel. "She won't sit still. Between now and the moment the police get involved, anything could happen." I nodded, though deep down I still wished Amelia would simply give up and leave quietly. But that wish dissolved barely an hour later. Daniel's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, putting it on speaker. "Hello, Daniel," Amelia's voice came through low and deliberate. "Congratulations. You've won a round. But I still have something that will drag all of you down with me." Daniel tilted his head. "Another victim script?" "No. The truth," Amelia replied. Do you remember in 2012, when the company took on the Florida resort construction project? The initial investment went over budget by $3 million. I remembered clearly. Elijah had explained at the time that it was due to a sudden spike in material costs. Amelia went on. It wasn't materials. It was money to cover up a fatal accident at the site. And the person who signed off on that off-the-record settlement was Elijah Miller. The room seemed to freeze. Daniel stammered, "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying, if I release that evidence," Amelia said, "Elijah's reputation, the company's, and the Miller family's will be shattered. I have nothing left to lose. But you do. So, let me walk away, and drop all charges. Or tomorrow, every paper in the country will run the story." She hung up. I sat in silence. What she said wasn't impossible. I remembered how Elijah had come home back then with a heavy expression, but he never gave details. If Amelia really had proof, it was dangerous. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, turning to Lance. "What do we do? If that gets out, the company's stock will crash. And Dad will be remembered as someone who covered up a crime." Lance stayed silent for a moment, then said, "There are 3 possibilities. 1. Amelia's making it up to bargain. 2. It happened but there's no evidence. 3. It happened and she's holding the original proof." I looked at both men, then said, "If it's number 3, we still have to face it. The truth is the truth. Hiding it again will only keep the cycle going." Daniel looked at me, his eyes red. "Mom, you can put aside your past with Amelia, but this is Dad. He did good things for the company, for me, for you." I took his hand. "I don't want to destroy your father's image. But I want even less for Daisy to grow up in a family where the truth is used as a bargaining chip." We decided to confront it head-on. Lance reached out to a contact in the Florida State Legal Department. Just a few hours later, he got a call back. I checked, the man said over speakerphone. "Yes, in 2012 there was a fatal accident at the construction site for that resort project. But the official record says, workplace accident, unforeseeable cause. There's no proof the company covered it up. If Amelia has internal documents, that would be the only thing that could prove her claim." "Thanks," Lance said, then turned to us. "So, either she's lying completely, or she's got a copy. If we can find where she's keeping it, we'll know." Daniel frowned. "She won't keep it at home. Could be in a safe deposit box." I suddenly remembered. Amelia has a storage box at Westfield Bank. I saw the rental paperwork in her desk once. Lance acted immediately. "We'd need a legal order to open it. But if we wait, she could clear it out. The only way is to get her to open it herself, with us there." That evening, Daniel texted Amelia. "Meet me at Westfield Bank, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Alone. If you're telling the truth, I'll consider dropping the lawsuit." Amelia's reply was short, "Agreed." I didn't sleep that night. Partly from worry, partly from knowing this could be the last time I saw Amelia in this context. The next morning, we arrived at the bank before the meeting time. Daniel and I sat at a table in the waiting area, Lance stood near the reception desk. At exactly 8 a.m., Amelia walked in. Black dress, oversized sunglasses, handbag clutched at her side. She signed some paperwork, and the bank staff led us into a private room. A long metal box was placed on the table. Amelia unlocked it, pulling out a thick folder and a small USB drive. "This is what I told you about," she said, sliding the USB toward Daniel. "Footage from the site's security camera, and the off-the-book settlement contract." Elijah signed it. Daniel looked at me. I took a deep breath. "We need to see it now." The staff left the room, and we plugged the USB into Lance's laptop. The screen showed grainy footage of a scaffolding collapse, workers trapped. Shouting could be heard. Then a blurry image of an office meeting, Elijah seated across from a group, handing over envelopes. Amelia folded her arms. I wasn't lying. Daniel stared at the screen. Lance was already opening the contract file. This is a copy, no original signature. And the video, he paused, shows signs of editing. Amelia, you spliced it. She gave a small, cold laugh. Edited or not, the media will believe it. And that's all I need. I stepped forward, standing directly in front of her. Then do it. But remember, I'll release everything about you and Alan at the same time. People will see exactly who you are and they'll start to wonder how much of your evidence is fake. Amelia hesitated. For a moment, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. Daniel spoke, his voice firm. You have no bargaining power left. As soon as we leave here, I'm filing the lawsuit and all the evidence. If you're smart, you'll disappear and keep quiet. The room was silent for a few seconds. Then Amelia gathered the folder, put it back in her bag. You'll regret this, she repeated, but this time it sounded like she was talking to herself. She left the room. 3 days later, the lawsuit was officially filed. Police and financial crime investigators began their work. Alan was summoned, Amelia vanished from the city. The press covered the story, but instead of focusing on Elijah, they concentrated on the embezzlement and the plot to frame the CEO. Daniel still bore emotional wounds, but he began to reclaim control of the company. Lance returned to his Boston office, promising to stay in touch. As for me, I went back to my own kitchen, my kitchen now with the smell of freshly baked apple pie filling the air. Daisy sat at the table, taking a bite and smiling wide. Grandma, for my next birthday party, will you sit next to me? I smiled, pulling her into my arms. Every time, I'll sit next to you. I knew the battle wasn't truly over, because Amelia was still out there somewhere. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had stepped out of the kitchen's shadow and taken my seat at the main table, and I would never let anyone push me back there again. This story shows that staying silent in the face of injustice only makes the wrongdoer stronger. Even when the truth is painful and carries risks, facing it and bringing it to light is the only way to protect what matters. Resolve, courage, and love for family can overcome schemes and betrayal. No one deserves to be pushed out of the story of their own life. When you dare to stand up and reclaim your place, you not only protect yourself, you set a living example of honesty and integrity for the next generation.